Hey everybody, you are looking at an image of the Dream Stela that was put up between the paws of the Sphinx by Thutmose IV, who uncovered the Sphinx and did restoration work on it, and I believe put his face on the Sphinx. He was a pharaoh of tremendous ego. He did a lot of big building projects, and I believe he kind of named himself as the king of the new age of Aries, put his face on the Sphinx, and a lot of crazy things were happening around his time, and this 18th dynasty of Egypt was taken for a lot of the Old Testament stories. The stories were changed around just a little bit, put in different order, just to throw off the reader of where these stories came from. But it is clear that the 18th dynasty was a very important time in Egypt, and some crazy things were happening. Some biblical things, you could say, were happening, and I'm going to talk about that at a little later in the video. But first of all, Thutmose IV and his relation to Moses. I have made many videos. Their lives, there's a lot of similarities, too many to ignore. But one thing I wanted to talk about is all the attention that is focused on Akhenaton and King Tut from this time. That's where a lot of historians go. And it, I don't blame them. There's a lot of mystery and intrigue behind those two pharaohs. Akhenaton gets a lot of attention just because he was kind of weird looking, and he is credited with starting monotheism. And historians get a little confused there because the true founder of the worship of Aten was Thutmose IV. And I wanted to play for you, and here is an image from Akhenaton as the form of the Sphinx worshiping Aten, holding a couple of tablets. But that all has to do with the true founder of the worship of Aten, who was Thutmose IV. Now, Michael Tsarion is one guy who I really respect as far as his knowledge of the true history. He gets a little crazy as far as conspiracy and evil and all that, but I really respect him for what he knows about ancient history, and I'm going to play a little bit of an interview on Red Ice Radio where he talks about Akhenaton being the biblical Moses because he is the creator of the worship of Aten. And then just a few moments later in the interview, he tells you who the actual creator of the worship of Aten is. And what's most interesting, he tells you where the first temple to the worship of Aten was set up. And that is a huge clue into why I believe that Thutmose IV is the biblical Moses, and it's pretty incredible, and I'll just play the clip.
Now, the other thing is that Jews and Christians believing that monotheism is unique to them, that there's something, incredible about Moses or whatever.
Yeah.
When we understand that, wait a minute, Moses is Akhenaton, then it's dismissed any concept that he is the creator of monotheism.
Yeah.
Or that the Jews have something unique there. Monotheism was being preached in Egypt thousands of years before they were ever born.
Yeah.
In fact, it's well known that the first temple to Aton was actually constructed by Thutmose IV. He's the grandfather of Akhenaton. And then Akhenaton's father, Amenhotep III, he's a very, very important figure because in the dramatis personae that has now been discovered, he is the prototype for the original Solomon.
All right. Okay.
All right. So Amenhotep III is I would say that along with Akhenaton, it is this Amenhotep III, his own father, that was an extremely important person to study. Well, it's his father that opened the first temple, and guess where that temple was, Henrik? It was in a place called Goshen, the famous Hebrew Goshen, the land of Goshen.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's where the first temple of the sun was built by Thutmose IV.
All right.
So even hundreds of years before Akhenaton lived, monotheism was already well established. Temples were already being built.
So there you heard Michael Tsarion, Once again, I don't agree with everything he says, but he definitely knows his ancient history. He tells you that Akhenaton is related to Moses because he is the creator of monotheism. And then he tells you the actual creator of monotheism in ancient Egypt was Thutmose IV, and he set up the first temple to worship Aten at Goshen, the famous land of Goshen from the Moses story. So that connects them. I have no doubt that a lot of the stories from Moses were taken out of the life of Thutmose IV. Now, the next thing he says in this interview, he talks about Mount Sinai and some theories about that. And one angle he goes off on, he mentioned something that hit me like a bolt of lightning, and I couldn't believe I have overlooked this. I remembered a video I saw maybe a couple years ago, and a lot of things made sense, and this is one theory that I really like, and I'm going to talk about it right after I play this clip. And this is Michael Tsarion pretty much leaving off, or starting up right where he left off in that previous clip.
Michael, I don't know if, I mean, this might not be relevant, but you know, the stories about Moses going up to the mountain, and I mean, do you think that there are references between that the mountain is the Great Pyramid and so forth?
Oh, there's no doubt about it. The symbol of the mountain, but the other idea is that, you see, there was a very important distortion and deception being perpetrated. We have to understand that the kind of interplay, the kind of secrecy, the kind of rule when Akhenaton was king in Egypt is very different from the rule after he is made an exile.
Yeah.
Okay, their operating procedures are totally different. After they were thrown out of Egypt and they made the move, the famous move towards Sinai,
Yeah.
it was very important for them to disguise the fact that the god that they were worshiping was the Egyptian god Aton.
Yeah.
So the biblicists, the people who wrote the story later, the people who sat down to compose in writing as opposed to an oral tradition, decided to concoct the story that focuses on Mount Sinai and the god Jehovah.
Yeah.
The god Jehovah is a very modern god. It is much later than the god Aton, okay? And Jehovah was a god of the outlying areas. He was only worshipped by very, very low-class people. He was only worshipped by very, very select farming, shepherd-type people in Arabia. And Jehovah is mostly of an Arabian creation. That's the mountains, not Sinai itself, but other mountains near there, they worship the famous Volcano god. So
Yeah.
it's very, very, simple.
Yeah.
People worship these gods.
Yeah.
So Yahweh was adopted. This is very important to understand, that the chosen people, who we now understand were Egyptian exiles, who were trying to, and later on when their story was written down, instead of saying, hey, Moses worshipped Aton, they said Moses worshipped Yahweh. This is a smokescreen. Yahweh was nothing more than a simple, unimportant volcano god, and anyone who's done their homework knows that.
So as soon as Michael Tsarion said volcano god, I remembered this video. This is called Was God a Volcano? And it says, if you actually read how Moses describes God in the Bible, it's basically the exact description of a volcano. And he goes over many verses in the Bible, and I want people to watch this video if they're interested in what I'm talking about. But all these verses in Exodus talk about the pillars of cloud and fire and quaking and trembling. This one from Exodus 13 says, and the Lord went before them by day in a pillar of cloud to lead them the way, and by night a pillar of fire. This is another verse here, and it talks about unto the host of the Egyptians through the pillar of fire and of the cloud, and troubled the host of the Egyptians. And this Yahweh seems to be a war god in the biblical narrative, seems to be casting vengeance on Egypt, and I think this was put in there for a reason. And I'm sure some of you, if you've watched my videos, can think of it already. And in this verse it says, this is from Exodus 19, and it came to pass on the third day in the morning that there were thunders and lightnings and a thick cloud upon the mount, and the voice of the trumpet exceedingly loud, and the people that was in the camp trembled. And in this verse here it says, and all the people saw the thunderings and the lightnings and the noise of the trumpet and the mountain smoking. And when the people saw it, they removed and stood far off. And these descriptions sound like a volcano. Lightning is a phenomenon associated with volcanoes that are large and have a big cloud. And of course, right now, if some of you watch my videos, I'm thinking Santorini. You had this god who sounds exactly like a volcano in the Hebrew Bible. The Hebrew Bible was written by people who were originally Egyptians. Egypt was a huge territory. These people were cast out of Egypt. They went north. The Hyksos people, they pretty much wrote the Hebrew narrative of the Bible, the original Bible. And back then, and still, I guess today, from the conflict, this was a deep source of hatred for these people being driven out of Egypt. They hated the Pharaoh. And Santorini erupting at the exact time of their exodus, that was looked at as a godlike event for these people. Yahweh is described as having, he's got it in for Egypt. And this was looked at as a biblical event by the people who wrote the Bible. The eruption of Santorini, all the devastation and death it brought upon Egypt. And I believe that could be the whole basis of the Moses story in Mount Sinai and his description of Yahweh, the burning bush. This is Numbers 14. If I can come up with one more verse, and it says, and that thou goest before them by daytime in a pillar of a cloud and in a pillar of fire by night. And that seems to be a common theme, where during the day huge columns of smoke were coming up like a furnace, and that's pretty much the exact description of a volcano. I just think this ties together very well. The people who wrote the Bible, these original Egyptians, thought that this event was a biblical event, so to speak. This all this devastation it brought on Egypt at the time of their exodus, they looked at this as a godlike event, and they put this in the Bible with little hints of it being the eruption of Santorini. And when I talk about these events, I don't mean to disparage anybody's religious beliefs. If your religious beliefs ring true with you, then it shouldn't matter at all what I say. I'm just going at this from a historical perspective. If your religious beliefs ring true with you, between thy eyebrows, as Thoth says in the Emerald Tablets, then you're all good. Doesn't matter what I say. You already got your beliefs inside your mind, and that is what's most important, what rings true with you. So I just wanted to say that. Don't want to rain on anybody's religious parade, but I'm just going at this from a historical perspective, and I believe that the God, Yahweh, this volcano God, this simple God, as Michael Tsarion described him, is not a simple God. It brought death and destruction to Egypt, and this was looked at as a great event by the original Hebrews who left the land of Egypt in a mass exodus. And that is really not recorded by history. I thought I would make this video to tie all this together. Hope you have a nice day.